welcome to day 11. On this glorious 106 degree Fahrenheit day, we continue to explore around Galilee. You can see the places that we explored yesterday, and then today we're going to explore these places. The first site was a 1st century AD Jewish town called Magdala. We know it's Jewish because of the menorah found on this stone, and we know the time frame in which this particular lasagna layer of the archaeological record is because of these coins found at this layer. During Jesus's Galilean ministry, he would often go to a synagogue and preach to the common people and essentially criticize the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and so this very well may be one of the synagogues at which Jesus was able to preach. Next, we returned back to the Sea of Galilee, but this time we explored a famous, what is commonly called as Jesus boat, but really it's just a boat from the era of Jesus that would have been common of fishermen, just like the disciples were. This approximately 2,000-year-old boat was discovered by accident when water levels of the Sea of Galilee were so low that two individuals just happened to come across it when they were taking a walk one day. This was in the year 1986, back when Israel had not dedicated so much time and energy into not taking so much fresh water from the Sea of Galilee. Instead, now, only a small percentage of the water that is consumed, water that is put onto crops, is actually from the Sea of Galilee. Instead, there's a lot of desalination. There's a lot of research about just when to apply irrigation and, a lot of times using wastewater that has been filtered and so on. Next, we hopped on a much newer boat to sail around in the Sea of Galilee and get an idea about what fishermen of the time, including the disciples, would have seen, would have felt out here on the waters. From the boat, we had a great view of Galilee, including some of the sites that were really important in Jesus's northern ministry, including the Mount of Beatitudes, so where Jesus is said to have delivered his Sermon on the Mount, and secondly, Capernaum, at which he is said to have completed many of his miracles and done a lot of his preaching. At one point during our ride, the captain of the ship turned off the boat, and our tour guide read us the scripture in which the disciples are out on these seas, so on the Sea of Galilee in a boat very similar to the one that we saw extracted in 1986. And it's really stormy and they're really afraid, and then of course Jesus just comes strolling across the water like it's no big deal, and so after that they played Amazing Grace, and it was this beautifully powerful, serene moment. The next stop was the Church of Multiplication of Loaves and Fishes, commemorating the only miracle story shared by all four Gospels, and of course that is the one about Jesus breaking 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes and ultimately feeding 5,000 men, not counting women and children. The 3rd century Byzantine church built at this site boasts one of the oldest and most intricate Christian mosaics of the time, and this rock is said to be where Jesus laid the food for the people. The next stop was the Mount of Beatitudes, sometimes nicknamed Mount Sinai of the New Testament, because this is where Jesus is said to have given his Sermon on the Mount and his list of Beatitudes. Essentially, this is forming kind of like a new set of rules for a new covenant with his people. And of course, not just the Jews at this point, but for all people, thank goodness for many of us. So Old Testament rules are very much like, do this, right? Honor your father and your mother, but don't do that, right? Don't eat meat and cheese at the same time, like those types of kosher rules. But Jesus kind of flips that on end, and instead of these individual rules, kind of like, you would give to your very young child, oh, don't do that, don't do that. Now the people have matured enough to kind of start asking why, right? So why this? Why do you want me to do that? And essentially Jesus boils it down to, pretty much love each other and love God. And so that is one of the main messages of this, or of his speech, of course. And of course, this lovely church commemorates that moment. And completely unrelated to biblical history, this site was absolutely gorgeous. We can see all of these honeybees. Honey has been huge here. At breakfast, they just take a huge bit of honeycomb and they just let it drip, and then you pull the honey out literally from the comb and smear it on your fresh bread. So really cool there. Also, I saw a bunch of green parrots, which was really exciting to see them in the wild, until I learned that they're super invasive. Someone brought them over because they loved them, and now they are invasive. So kind of a bummer. Anyway, next site is Caesarea Philippi, and essentially this is a site of pagan worship going way back. In the Old Testament, it's referred to as Baal Gad. Later, it became a site of worship for the Greek god Pan, so the god of fright, so half man, half goat, so think devil kind of imagery. In fact, another name for this site is Banyas, which is the Arabic form of Pan. So again, a lot of worship of Pan. No mention that Jesus ever came to this site, but he was in the vicinity on Mount Hermon. The final site of the day was Capernaum, which you may recognize from many different biblical stories. Jesus went into the synagogue in Capernaum and he, preached in all these ways. Jesus healed Simon Peter's mother-in-law in a house in Capernaum, and did all sorts of other healing, specifically miracles in this place. And so what we see here is the white synagogue, so nice marble, nice white stones that are really distinctive. And so even outside of the Bible, there's a lot of evidence, there's a lot of mention of this white synagogue in extra biblical texts. And so Jesus came here to heal even on the Sabbath, and ultimately was able to go a few houses down and stay with his friends whenever he was in town. Today, this spaceship-looking church commemorates this place. It highlights this place amidst all of these other little houses that we saw off to the left. This house in particular is really special. So again, this is Peter's house, which we know because of all of this evidence, both from the Bible, from archaeology, etc. There was a Byzantine church built on top of the site, which, maybe you're kind of getting the idea here that if there was a Byzantine church at the site, chances are, at least they thought something spectacular happened there. And because these churches were built, only a couple hundred years tops after Jesus was around, chances are, these stories were passed down from generation to generation. Pilgrimages were happening even way back then. So, hey, this guy Jesus, he did all these things. Let's go to a site where he stayed. And so, my grandma told me this, and so I'm going to show you this. And so, pretty good connection back to the original events, at least a lot more so than we can do today. But luckily we have archaeology as well, and so the archaeological evidence also supports these claims. And we wrapped up our day by just kind of enjoying the Sea of Galilee. This is also in Capernaum, so we can see just how close it is to the Sea of Galilee again. After returning to Tiberias for our second night, I had a little bit of an adventure at the post office, walked around town a bit, and finally ended my day in style. Thanks for watching.